Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fika. Our returning guest today is author Brian Greiner. You'll remember Brian, from previous episodes when we discussed his The Saga of Bob series and Haiku Cat, as well as his help with the wannabe author and stretching your book budget shows, because that is what Brian does. He figures things out and is generous with his time, helping others. Very much like the protagonist Felix in his The Accursed North series, which we will be focusing on today. But not exactly like Felix, because as far as I know, Brian has never battled werewolves. However, he can be quite modest and restricted in his sharing of personal things, so we may never know. Thanks for your help over the years, your active participation in Fika's chats, and for Felix, which I believe is an example of resilience for all of us, Brian. And welcome to Fika.
Oh, thank you, Vicky. I just want to state for the record that I've never fought a werewolf. I have fought an angry cat, but not a werewolf.
I'm not sure which would, in the hierarchy of vicious mammals, be on top.
The cat would win.
Yes, the cat always wins. That's definitely a thing. So before we get started on all these werewolves, can you give us a little bit of synopsis of what the Accursed North and the Werewolves of Winter and the Final Doom is all about?
Sure. I was thinking about this, and there's two ways of looking at it. One is what the author thinks the book is about, and the other is what the reader might think the book is about. I know that you and I have discussed this very issue more than once and at length. The author point of view is basically, what if werewolves were real in terms of science, not magic? And how could that happen? How would it affect the world? And that's the basic questions that I started with as when I started the book. And I looked at how it affects society, because as we're seeing now with the current COVID issues, but also as in the past, societies get hit with bad things that happen seemingly at random. And ordinary people rarely have a chance to fight back. They basically adapt and carry on. And in the Werewolves of Winter, the hero, like everyone else, learns to adapt to a bad thing, which is a plague of werewolves. And life goes on until one day it doesn't. And he has to buckle down and pay attention and seriously battle for survival. And in the second book, The Final Doom, is the hero meets up with some friends that are mentioned in the first book, and together they battle the big bad, and they thwart the big bad's plans for the final doom. In a nutshell, that's basically it.
Werewolves come and they must be stopped.
Yeah,
they
but the problem isn't just the werewolves. It turns out that there's something behind the werewolves, and so there's a hierarchy of badness.
Yes, there's a whole thing. But before we get into the depths of that, Brian, there are some greetings this morning. Tamara's already laughing. Robin is sitting at his office having coffee, and he enjoys listening in, and he loves these talented people such as yourself that are on the episode. So you better sound talented and not disappointed, Brian.
I should have worn my sunglasses.
Susan says she's here too. Just so you know, Susan is here. Susan is in the house. And Dave wants to know, he says, show me the cookies, Brian. But you didn't bake cookies this morning. You baked
donuts. I did donuts.
But did you bring them down for us to see from your basement lair?
I forgot. I'd have to rush up, but that would leave a blank screen. That would be terrible.
We can have no blank screens.
You forgot to remind me.
I forgot to remind you. I have so little on my mind on Thursday mornings, Brian.
Exactly.
I should have just gotten that out there to you. So, since we're already starting our banter, Dave says donuts are even better. Since we're already starting your banter, when you were describing the story, you said from the writer's point of view, which is a segue into a discussion that we've had over time that books are taken in several different ways. Once the writer puts them out into society, they can't control how the readers are going to take them, right? And you have in the past said, I've thought about Vicky, and you're right.
Yep,
so
that's true.
so on another way of looking at these things is that you see it as the battle against the vampires and the big bad, and and the dangers that are out this. Now I see it as the story of Felix, our protagonist, because the whole first book is in first person narrative, and we hear how he is not only battling the werewolves but battling being on his own for at least 2 years, with the vampire attacks becoming more
Werewolf
prevalent.
attacks, you mean?
Werewolf attacks, sorry. I apologize to all werewolves and vampires out there.
The vampires would be a whole other book.
That's a whole other book. So
But that's a good idea.
werewolves and the vampire. Let's switch to a comment from Robin. A question, I believe. We'll get it's just side take track the conversation. What is your opinion of where the legends of werewolves originated, and what sparked your interest in incorporating werewolves in your writing? Why werewolves, Brian?
Yeah, okay. My opinion of the legends is I have no opinion. They were just something that I grew up with from the movies. Beyond that, I have no in-depth knowledge of them other than they're everywhere. They're everywhere. Every culture has a werewolf legend or a vampire legend or um, something bad that lurks in the night. As to why I wrote a book about werewolves, well, this is back in 2015, 2016. And being an old man, my memory isn't as good as it was, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. It tickled my fancy. A plague of werewolves. It just seemed like such a nifty thing.
I think it's important when we talk about you, Brian, and we talk about you a lot sometimes when you're in the room. I think it's important to say that you grew up during the big B movies, and
Yeah.
the pocket novels. The everything wasn't like big and perfect. So you have that whole creature feature kind of thing was your era, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So
I
you
was
have
born in the 50s, so I grew up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and that was the era of the ace doubles, which had two novelettes in one, and they were cheap. Even for the time, they were cheap. They were you know, as I mentioned, as on the show, they started at 25 cents for two complete novels, and it was a fabulous idea. And they were mass produced, so they were cheap to produce, um, and it was done in the era of the big publishing houses. So effort was put into them, and it was a way for new writers to get started. Um, it was an evolution um, of the uh, of the pulp magazine trade, which was way before my time. But a lot of the writers grew up writing for the pulps, and that dried up, and then they went into the mass-produced pocketbooks. And but as you say, it turned into every everyone wanted the one big hit, and if you weren't a big hit, meh, we didn't want you. But all of the big name authors started out with the smaller publications, and
so
that's how they learned their craft.
So you have sort of embraced that idea with this story that, this is the werewolf of your thoughts, of your imaginations.
Yeah, but I
of
tried to make
your
it
what ifs.
science-based rather than magic-based. And I spent some time thinking, okay, well, what would a science-based werewolf be? And it wouldn't be like the creature features. It would be a slightly modified human. But as I pointed out in the book, it was a nickname that was applied by the media because it was a catchy phrase.
Yeah. So because yeah, the media always goes for the catchy phrase, and
Yeah,
I shouldn't say that. Okay. Quite often the media will go for the catchy phrase, and they have found that fear promotes sales. So why not throw that in too, right?
yeah, yeah.
Also,
Well, there's also this is the age of the meme,
yeah,
and
no,
memes are short
make it
little
short
snippets.
and
Yep.
to the something that you might learn with some of your other novels, right? No, I love Bob. And also Robin, because I knew we were doing this show, we should be having a gentleman who wrote The Magic of Wolves and is more into the wolfish folklore. Actually, I hope to have a couple of different people later on in the next month or so. So stay tuned for that. Susan asks, I am quite sure yet. She has author Susan Marcus on there. Good girl. Good woman. All right. We already had a discussion today from right. Okay. Werewolves are also symptomatic of the fear that the animalistic part of human psychic will take over all species. It is the wolves that, I mean, wolves get a lot of bad press. So that wasn't a question. That was an intelligent statement. And I think we could use one on the show today.
That's okay.
uh, oh, the cat's watching
Yeah.
Schwartz, and
Hello,
he
Schwartz.
knows your voice, so he's okay. So that is how. So you thought of this thing, and it's on the back of the book, so we can say that it's a plague because that
Hmm.
starts the werewolves. That doesn't
It's a
alter.
change
That's
plague.
not a spoiler. Yeah, the changed plague. It's not. I don't think that a spoiler mix.
No, it is
And
on the back of the book. Yeah.
yeah, and you sort of described so and I want to say once again that the book was written in 2016, although some of us are trying to get him to bring it out again because they really enjoyed that. That someone is me. Warning, the first book does have a cliffhanger, so if you say I'm going to finish this and then go do the dishes or whatever, just don't worry about the dishes because you will be buying the next book within 2 seconds. All very very it is an indie book. Brian does it all himself from cover to formatting to whatever. So you're only looking at $3.99 for the book,
For
which
the ebook.
for the ebook, yes.
Yeah.
So that's which is why I read ebooks because they're only $3.99 or $4.99. And so for less than $10, you have like 10 hours of enjoyment there ahead of you. More if someone can talk him into writing a third, which that would be me. So we were just so Felix. Okay, I'm gonna go to Felix now because I absolutely love Felix. And I did sort of call him a grumpy old man. And Brian was like, yes, but he's like, and it wasn't anything negative because I will defend Felix to my end. Okay, he's an older gentleman, he's retired, he's had to deal with the corporate life in the capitalistic world. He finally gets his place out in the country where he can grow his garden and live his life. And these werewolves, why do I keep these werewolves show up to stop it all from happening? He goes on, even though he's not quite happy with the world, as far as I'm concerned, he's the one that will possibly save it. We get that idea at the beginning of the novel. Now, Brian, as you are a man of mature years as well as many of us are around here, and I'm not saying you're grumpy or not. I'm not making that judgment call live. We can talk about that later. But what strength did you give Felix that you feel come from um experience,
Sure.
age?
You get to a certain age, especially if you're male, is you learn what your limits are. um, and when not to push them. But more importantly, when you can, and the price you'll pay is for doing so. When you get older, you are better at looking at the larger picture. You're less likely to get hyper focused on one small segment. Um, and so I think that that's basically the real strength that his age has given him. Um, he's less liable to fall for a honey coated lie. I mean, people might accuse him of being cynical, but it's 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 hard when experiencing. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Think about things a little more deeply. And don't make a rush to judgment.
Well, this is what I found about him. I think that and you can sort of feel it coming upon you that you don't rush into things. There is a patience of, I'm going to stop and have my coffee and think about this first. There may be a whole bunch of werewolves outside my door, but they're just going to have to wait till I
Yeah.
get this done. And I found, also there, also with the books, I found that they they followed his line of thought. So as he was building things or designing things to keep himself safe, it would go through everything he had in his toolbox, everything he had saved to recycle. Like, it wasn't just coming out of nowhere. There
Hmm.
were boundaries to his engineering feats.
Oh
And
yeah.
I started to feel that it made me, that pace that we will get to it when we get to it, made me so calm in the middle of this very dangerous book. Like, I'm just sitting there, and that's right. You do those few dirty dishes up, Felix, because they will pile up. I have a pile on my sink just reading this book. All right. so it is very calm, and he takes his time to do his mindfulness exercises because he has been on his own
Mhm.
and he's learned all this, and I think he is a hero that we need today. I think that he, you know,
I don't know if he's a hero, but I see him as a decent sort who is trying to do the best he can, and aware that sometimes there are still things left for him to learn. And he
um
does learn and grow in the two books.
I feel like you're now, well, no, heroes have to grow. There has to be a growth arc. And you can see that happening, but I feel you're being too humble on Felix's behalf. Now, as a reader
Possibly.
who is who is who is deciding what she thinks of it, I think he is a hero. I mean, when we look at the hero's journey, it's you start off with the problem, you figure out how to deal with it, then all of a sudden, kaboom. And then there are other people giving you information and whatever. And then you have that last kaboom. And then,
Mm.
you go on to book 3 if you're smart. So, so I think he is like many of the characters that I'm seeing now in books. He's not your average kind of hero. He
Yeah.
used brain smarts, which are still, but he still deals with those. He's just real. He's a real hero. I
No, like
mean, I don't think that the werewolf part and that's particularly a hero, but he would be a hero, like regardless of whether it was werewolves or warthogs or whatever the problem is,
corporate
vampires.
managers.
He would manage it in the same. It's just an example. I thought what resilience he has to be living on his own for these last 2 years with hardly any human contact and maintaining his focus and his jobs, and things get done when they get done, and there's a place for everything, and all of those things that people find boring and, oh, we get told that a billion times, were really important in the making of this book. And
Hmm.
so I liked it. Okay, no more questions here. Just go on and talk. Okay, shall we get into it, people? Our problem.
Yeah, let's beat up on Brian
Describing
some more.
your book. Describing your book. Now, in today's world, there are many ways people describe a book. They might call it a certain genre, or they might say it's like this and this and this book, or whatever. And Brian is not so big on those things as he has stated. So, would you like to give how you feel about those ways of describing a book, Brian?
I was discussing this with my wife, and she slapped me down because she thinks that you were correct in describing it as a cross between such and
I
such and
love
such and
Lynn.
such. Um, because as she pointed out, it's a shorthand. So to me, my books are not, um, say, Red Green meets X Files. I mean, that would be one way of looking at it's that the Werewolves books, um, because Felix wasn't perfect. Stuff he made didn't always work, but it was good enough. And I do want to hasten to point out, although what he builds is reasonable, it's not necessarily accurate enough to be safe for someone to duplicate this stuff.
Oh, yeah, that should be a disclaimer. Don't try this
Yeah,
at home, kids.
yeah.
Okay.
And if you do, you deserve all the injuries and death that you get. Um, it just had to sound real.
That's another
And
thing I wanted.
and of course, he's taking shortcuts because he's basically in the middle of a war. It isn't like it's a calm peacetime experience. Um, but you mentioned at one point his, as the stuff that he makes. Um, he has the workshop of my dreams, and I go into some detail of all the equipment that he has, and it's everything that I want that my wife won't let me buy because she won't let me
Because
bankrupt as
she's
buying tools.
and she probably she probably it doesn't feel that wants you to be making all these weapons out there because now that you've written about them you have to make sure that they will really work, which I'm
No,
sure they will do. um, no, no. So good for Lynn. That solved that discussion. But the point is that we quite often in society say, you know, this show is like this. Well, I originally said that this show was like MacGyver and Grumpy Old Men meet the X Files.
mhm.
And then I had to think back. I wasn't upset with the idea of Grumpy because Felix has his moments. He has pain. He has, nobody sees things the way he does. But I think that,
Especially when he's right.
especially when he's right, and he really is quite often right. Is that that he is respectful of all those around him, whereas the grumpy old men in the movies might not have been. So, but the point is that is a way of drawing people in. It is shorthand. That's a good word, Lynn. And and it is shorthand to get them coming in, as are genres. Now, you seem to be having a genre problem as well, or
No, well, to a certain extent, I like good stories, and I try to write
I agree.
entertaining stories. What the genre is almost irrelevant. But for werewolves, it's a bit of cosmic horror. It's a bit of science fiction. It's a bit of a thriller, and I could make excuses for each and every one of those genres. Um,
I think
but
the
it's
genre is the aesthetics. This would be a good
okay.
story if you put it in, into wartime or any of the above. But
Yeah,
it lets people know there are werewolves if they like
yeah.
werewolves. Or
I, I, another genre that this might fit into is survival horror.
is that a thing?
Yes, apparently.
Oh, you've looked
Um,
it up recently because of our
no, I've seen it. No, I mean, you see these things, and I go, people want to put things into boxes too much, and
I agree. I agree.
and they and then they get fixated on one narrow box.
This is who
Read,
I am.
read outside your comfort zones.
But that
Just
is
read stories.
but they do that with everything in society now. I think they have to label it down to, as I've said,
Yeah,
I am a person who drinks coffee at 2 o'clock on Wednesdays, in red socks.
yeah,
Like this is what's
and it's all marketing driven. Now, I'm old enough to have lived through reading stories that parodied and satirized that attitude from the 60s and 70s. That's the era of, as of the show, Mad Men. I lived in that era. I grew up in that era, and I grew up with people mocking it, and and I think the mockery
needs to
stayed.
come back.
Um, that was,
It stayed in Felix.
yeah, or it's a defining part of me, I guess, is to look at things a bit askance, and if necessary, mock them. And now, of course, that I write books, I can have my characters as to the mockery, and I can say, well, I'm not responsible for what the characters say.
You aren't responsible.
No.
There has to be. Okay, while we're on what the characters say, here's just a little disclaimer. As we pointed out, that Felix is an older gentleman who's seen a lot and is quite frustrated with the fact that other people aren't seeing it. So there may be comments towards certain political movements, certain countries, certain cities. Toronto, watch out. Um, but they are just things.
Felix has opinions, and being a cranky old man, he's going to express those opinions.
And those opinions do not necessarily represent those of Fika with Vicky or Brian Greiner himself. Okay,
Unless they're of Toronto.
I'm trying to save you.
I used to live there. Um,
See, I'm sorry. I'm listening. Listen to this, Brian. You never listened to me, so maybe you'll listen to Robin. Listening to Brian, I think he should do some writing for Hollywood and show them how to write a true hero's journey.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Robin. Okay. I will
But
remind
I,
him of this
but I don't think
often.
Hollywood is ready for me.
I wasn't ready for you this morning, but here we are. I normally don't see you until, an hour or two from now. Okay, so a little more time, a little more coffee. Brian, where were we? Okay, so we apologize. We didn't apologize. We simply stated that Felix is a character. And the characters have opinions, and
Mhm.
Felix has opinions, but he is always respectful. He's respectful of the young. So let's set this up when we talk about a thriller.
I just want to point out that there are other characters who have strong opinions that contradict Felix. Let's not forget that is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
he isn't alone making things. So people talk back to him,
yes.
and
So Brian is
and
responsible
he
for those
respects them.
characters too. So he
Yeah,
can't totally agree. So he can't be Felix if he's also Lee and Dixon and the other characters. Can you, Brian? You can't be all of those people.
we are large. We contain multitudes.
When we're a writer, but
Yeah.
not when we're talking to our wife. Okay. Um, so it is a thriller because once again, what I thought was cool was that the first book, except for the werewolves and some far off views of people, it is first person narrative, and there are no other characters besides Felix. And yet I loved it and what was going on in his head. That I consider to be thriller type stuff, Brian, which is why we came into the thriller type stuff. And then he in the next book we meet his friends from his, groups that he knew in life, and then went into internet groups which he haven't had to talk, and they all work together, this ragtag team of nerds with their inhalers, work together to save the world. So I mean, and I don't think whether it's saved or not, you know, that you will find out, and you will decide whether it's for the best or not.
Yeah.
But
Well, I just want to point out that the horror is like all horror. There's a price to be paid, and the people take on. It's the good guys, male and female. I'm using the word guys in its generic sense. Everyone pays a price, but they're willing to pay it. And so, okay, if you want to call that a heroic, fine, I will accept that. But they do what needs to be done. I'm just saying that I can
I
see
don't
your
really
point of
care
view.
if you accept it or not, Brian. I'm calling it heroic, but you carry on.
Yeah, yeah. But there's a price to is to be paid, and it's not always necessarily a happy ending. It's a happy-ish ending.
Yeah, it wouldn't be realistic if it was.
Yeah,
I mean, and we sort of puff at that if we're reading, but there was no sacrifices made without purpose, and I think that's what's important in writing. Because you keep everything in its boundaries and explain it, and some might find. Like I said, it made me very calm. It made me understand what we were going to do, but maybe it's because I get too much into books. Like I'm there with you. So Felix wasn't completely alone, but it made me feel like we knew what we were doing. I knew what was coming next, and there was no surprises. Welcome back, Tamara. Where did you go? Tamara's just saying she's back.
maybe she went off purchased at the books.
She went off to push. Could be, could be.
A writer lives in eternal hope.
So okay, I have a book for you. When you were saying that somebody bought your book somewhere and you were trying to figure out who it was, and then I was talking to my kid and we were saying, okay, we just had this picture I had this picture of this writer saying, like a commercial or someone for Amazon, someone bought my book, and then they hire a private investigator, and they show up at this guy's store in the middle of nowhere, whether it's the Arctic or the
With a plate of
prairies,
cookies.
or the place saying with a tear rolling down his eye. Thank you so much. And then, of course, my kid turned that into a horror story of the same kind of thing. Here, buy more books. Here's
Well,
money.
actually, I do have more.
Oh, Tamara was taking the puppy out. Okay, that's
Yes,
allowed, Tamara. So
she has her own little werewolf.
she has her own little werewolf. That is correct. So buy books. Make indie authors happy. Make all authors happy. Brian, well, there it is. Do you now? I read this book thinking, there's a lot of info in this book.
Mm.
But there's a point is as society should, and not just because you don't want to get in trouble, but do you think that authors of fictional books are responsible if someone should take the information and create things from
Yeah,
it?
I actually kept that in mind. That's why I issued the disclaimer earlier. Is that my or Felix's descriptions are kind of vague as how he actually made things, and that's for a reason, because it doesn't matter to the story how if it's super detailed. Um, there's a thing it goes boom or it goes whoosh, and it has limited
Or
effect. Yes, uh, that's good enough. You just need to know these things exist, and it's not like I'm bringing up brand new information that no one ever heard of.
no, no.
Making it's like making caltrops has been known for like 1,000 years. Uh, everything that Felix makes is well known and has been for decades. Um, but there are some books I agree that go into immense detail just to show off how clever the author is about how to do this, that, and the other thing, and giving detailed measurements of, say, a public building and how their bad guy makes use of that. You don't need to do that. I
No,
think
no. But it's also
I think that is bullshit. That's wrong.
it I was having a conversation about
It's
Thea's
it's make
thing
it
the
big
other day.
enough
No, but
and wrong enough
but
that
that
anybody
is
actually tries it
it's
gets
like
hurt.
on America's Got no, what was it? American Idol or whatever, where, um, we'll just explain that. But it's self, it's just it's a lack of self-discipline, I think. It's something that the writer wants to do. They want to go down to this path. They did that extra research. The discipline isn't there to stop them from having to put it in. And so there it goes. It's not about what the book needs or the book in general. And I think that can be a problem sometimes. We have to what I heard this week is, do you speak with a knife or do you speak like a balloon? A knife cuts through and makes things straight and concise, and a balloon is full of emotions and pumps all around. So you do want to write with a knife, I think, or a sword. Brian.
Sword.
Sword,
Because
because
you
it's
can,
bigger.
no, it's longer, so you can keep things at a distance.
So you're not taking that punch when you got your words out of there. It's safer at a distance.
My sacred words are sacred for a reason. They're children of my mind.
All right, Brian. In earlier shows, because you have retired from the software game, as it were, in earlier shows, we have discussed, how you keep track of all your ideas for books and everything with different software. And, you quite often ask authors when you're in the question sheet, what software, if they use software or just a notepad or
Mhm.
whatever. And so in this book, there's a lot of details as far as what he has to make stuff with and what
Mhm.
tools he uses and what he has in packs and whatever. Did you need to use a software to keep track of all of those things?
No,
Or were you able to remember that?
because it's my dream workshop, I have it entirely populated, and I know what's in it. Um, as, but even from a general handyman, um, men, many men, and there's some women, as I will include this, love tools. Having the right tool is just a joy to use. And people that love good tools tend to collect them. Like people who love writing with fountain pens tend tend to collect far too many of them. Um,
Anybody we know?
mean aside from me, um, because so it's easy, and someone in his position on a farm who likes to tinker is going to have a reasonably well stocked junk pile, if you will, or a stockpile of things, so that when the mood takes them, they've got the stuff on hand. There's nothing worse than wanting to do something and not having the part. So when you go out and buy something, you buy 2 or 3 times as much. And I allude to this like in the end of book one, where he's going through the workshop and he sees all of his bins and containers where everything is carefully sorted. Um, I can only dream of being that organized um, in my own shop. But yeah, it wasn't hard to keep track of what he had because
Because you love that whole thing so much
yeah,
that
but
that
don't forget that he also has limits. And I didn't have to take stock of what he had. I just knew that there are
there
always
would be.
limits. There's
Right.
never
So
enough to do everything you want.
and limits,
And
as we know, is important in books with magic because that keeps the book believable. I mean, you can't just suddenly throw in a special one to do a special
yeah,
job. That's not fair to the reader or good writing. And so what I discovered is there was also in limits in engineering. You couldn't just suddenly have like this big bulldozer or something. This was not part of his lifestyle.
mhm,
So so that was done very well. And I
it
did
did.
note the software and that being used as he was plotting things out for
Yeah,
parts of this
that
book.
some of the software that he alludes to is stuff that I've used in the past.
Okay.
Is to do things like data analysis and mapping. Um, that's all real stuff.
As you live in your basement. That's real stuff too. Felix in his
Yeah.
basement. Okay. Robin loves your bench behind you there. He calls it your research bench. And I told you it makes a fabulous background. Okay. I want to bring this up because apparently Robin thinks we have a topic. Robin, if you know what it is, please let us know.
Yeah.
Okay. Brian says, sorry to go off top. Brian, sorry to go off topic. I have always picked at and built computers since the 80s. What kind of software development did you used to do?
Oh, well, that's actually on topic because it's a old man who likes making things. um, I got started with microprocessors back with the first 4004 and the 8008, where you had to build your own. Um, and so it was all assembly language, sometimes assembly by hand. And I did assembly language for many years, and then got into higher level languages and never looked back because there's things you can do. As your projects get larger, you go into a higher level. It's like C, for example, and there you've got a choice of. It's just like writing. You can work with with low level tools, or you can work with higher level tools. Um,
It all depends on what Lynn will let you buy.
exactly. Or if I can sneak into the house and say, "Oh, that old thing, I've had that forever." Um, there's, it's a hint for all you young men out there. That's one trick you can use. Um, the other trick, which I learned from my father, is when you go to pay something with cash, not so common anymore, is you say, "Oh, hon, I'm a little short. Can you loan me $20 or whatever?" And then you pay for it and you pocket the change.
Brian! Are you? See, this is
It
something
takes
Felix
years
would
and
say.
years
This is
for the wife
something
to
Felix
catch
would
on.
say, and therefore you're not, backing yourself up on your words. Brian, it is not about men or women. It just depends on the thing. Lynn, you are smart with planning and sheets, and apparently Lynn is much brighter when it comes to the finances. So she will she she takes care of that. It could
I
be in
think we've
some
shocked
cases
Tamara.
that yeah, Tamara says, "Oh my god," and I understand Tamara, but it's unconditional love. Sometimes he goes places he shouldn't, but we still love him. Okay, I think I know this person. DJ Dama who said he was going to watch today because he knew Brian was going to be on. The Sword of Wisdom, perhaps. I think the Sword of Wisdom is a good way to explain it. I'm not sure that's Brian's sword.
More the sort of keep your distance there.
Brian is wise.
I have a sharp, pointy thing, and I'm not afraid to use it.
So
So yes, I
from
suppose it is wisdom, and the wisdom is you
Brian,
don't
you're
bother
gonna,
the author at his
if
work.
anything happens to anybody around you, and you're like saying this on air, we that's the wisdom.
Yeah.
DJ Jama says.
I
Oh,
think I should have
DJ.
brought down my sword.
So you should have brought down your swords, your other toys. How? Never mind. I don't even want to know. Okay, so do we have? I mean, I have stuff written, but is there anything else you want to say about Werewolves of Winter, Brian?
Um, well, I'm excited that people are enjoying it. I mean, as we make mock of how writers like me fall to their knees and cry with joy as when with every book is bought, and that's not entirely untrue, I'll tell you. Um, but it's nice, because we work so hard on these things, all writers, and it's always nice to see other people finding joy in our thoughts. Um, one book I recently read about the craft of writing, the author, a writer, said that books are a form of telepathy, where the writer transmits their thoughts into the mind of the reader. And I thought that's a darn good way of putting it. Um, so it's
It
always
is.
nice to have our thoughts received and appreciated.
it's encouraging. And you work all of like for days, years, forever on a book without knowing
Mm,
how it's going to be taken out there. So it's a nice validation of
yeah.
what you're doing. I remember once I got my Christmas Amazon card. It's a regular I didn't mean to say Amazon. I got a Christmas Chapbooks card, okay? It could have been Kobo, it could have been it's too late now. And I was looking through the list of books that were possible, and there was a poetry book about wolves actually. Um of a and and it had just come up. I could tell, and it hadn't been purchased before, and it was on for $2.99, and I bought it just because I thought, "Merry Christmas" to that author. Like, they're like, I knew that it would be, "Oh, somebody bought my book," right? If I was the only one. So, you too can make a writer happy for less than a cup of coffee, depending on what retailer you get your coffee from, the price of
Or
the
if you
book.
want to, or if you want to make as a writer, super happy, go to a book fair or a place where they have a lot of authors selling their books, and buy one of their paperbacks and ask for it to be autographed. Oh, my wife and I went to a local place 2, 3 years ago. Blazing hot. It's the hottest day of the year. We decided to go out anyway. And there were a dozen authors and they'd been there all day at the poor sods. And I went from table to table and bought one of their paperbacks until my money ran out. And I'm afraid
Lynn wouldn't let you have any more.
that's true. Well, I think she had to give me $5 to finish paying for the last one. But you read them, and from the stacks on the tables, they hadn't sold many, and a number of them were books I would not normally buy if I'd seen them in the store. But I've read them, and you go, I kind of like this. Not sure I'd buy any more like it, but I'm glad I read this book. It was different. It was well read, different point of view. Um, so yeah, um,
This is why I love
let the
doing.
authors know that you like it.
Yeah, they're out there. Go on their Facebook page, send them a message and just say, "I like your book." And Brian, I'm really surprised because I always thought you were very frugal, and now I'm seeing this whole different side of you. You're just frugal with certain things.
Yes,
tools being tools being not one of them. Uh
and books.
okay. This is a thing. What? Robin, are you in my head? I don't even know if Robin's a real person anymore. Okay. First of all, Robin says, I don't know Robin, by the way, but just through Fika. Well, you are too cool, Brian. You were right about the collecting of tools. Okay. So maybe not a perfect person, Robin, but pretty close. And then he said, "Where can I get may your coffee be hot and your stories be sweet? Fika with Vicky coffee mug for my desk." Robin, I am looking into that. I mean, I care, I'm sort of an environmental kind of person, so I'm thinking, does the world need more merch? But on the other hand, yeah, they kind of do need of mine. So I'm looking into that. I'm trying to find a place that has bigger mugs because we know a lot of those little ones that are used for merch are not going to cut it. So
Yeah,
I would like to have one that says, "May your coffee be hot and your story sweet." I would like to have one that says, you're my you're my kind of reader," to stop the reading shame. There's different things there, but definitely thank you for that comment. It is encouraging me to look further into this.
you definitely
Uh,
want to get the 15-ounce sizes.
yes. In fact, I feel, oh, Tamara agrees they need a Fika mug. Now, I will. That brings us into the fact that February 14th is Love Your Library Day. Let's forget about all that romantic stuff and concentrate on what's important, people. And so
Oh,
when I was in my library the other day, they had a sign up that their mugs were on sale. And so I walk to the desk and I'm like, okay, I will just give you the money if they're not, but how big are these mugs? Because this is important. And they brought it out and they were very proud and said, see, you can have like stew in that or soup as well as your coffee. So I have loved my library by purchasing this mug. That doesn't just mean, public libraries. You can, if there's somebody in your neighborhood who has a little free library and they want to they take good care of it or whatever, and you just leave them a little love note saying thank you. um so your library in your house, buy Brian's book for it. You can also order that paperback online, but it will not be autographed. He can however send you a postcard with an autograph
Yes,
on it if you ask.
I have
One
done
with a
that.
haiku. You should have haiku postcards
Yeah.
with Eddie.
Well, with Eddie, well, that's a good segue to the Haiku Cat book.
Yeah, so there's the haiku cat where once
As
Brian wrote
it
haikus.
has
And
it has pictures of it's of my cat Eddie and a haiku to go along with every picture.
I'm not quite sure if Eddie has written the haikus or
He inspired them. He imparts his wisdom to me, sometimes at the top of his voice early in the morning.
does everybody hear that? Or
Oh
author
yeah.
Janice Barrett says, I don't normally read books about werewolves, but you have convinced me to try a new genre starting with your book. There you go, Brian.
Oh, thank you,
It's
Janet.
all about the convincing.
Yeah, I do want to point out that on my website, which is on the scroll at the bottom, um, for every one of my books, I have a chapter or two up for you to read, so that you're not just buying blind. I'm a big fan of getting a sample first.
And even if I still think that $3.99 is worth taking a shot at, but the samples are a good idea. And for any new authors out there, that's the point. People are taking a chance when they're purchasing your book. They
Yes.
have no idea what they're going to get in there. And with the book with the price of books getting larger,
Oh, it's
um,
stupid expensive.
I picked when I went to the library, I was picking up a book I wanted to read. I still haven't gotten to it because I've been reading Brian's books. No. There's a lot of to do reading in Vicky's life. But I want to read this book. And they always put on there, you save this much money by using the library. $36.29 for one fictional book. And so that's a little, I would not be purchasing a book for that price unless it's something that I know, like if somebody came out with a beautifully illustrated Halloween tree book or something Wicked This Way Comes, that's a special gift. But just to read a book that I don't even know if I'm going to like or not is that's so yeah, it's nice to
Yeah,
have those little
pricing books is a whole black art for my books. I urge people to buy the ebooks. To be perfectly honest, I get the same royalty whether somebody buys the ebook or the paperback, even though the paperbacks are way more than the ebooks. It's just that the printing costs are so large, and that's out of my control.
Well, even if you're an indie author, you have no control over the price of your hard copy book because that's set.
You have a very limited control.
Yeah, that's set more by the, so you get more. So yes, the ebooks. If on I don't normally go here because I don't want anybody to feel that they have to live their life in any certain way. Everybody has their stuff going on. They're busy. However, one of the reasons I like ebooks is because they don't use up trees. So if you read 40 ebooks in a year, you have canceled out your footprint for getting that reading device. So, and you can also read on your phone if you have younger eyes. They also are lighter if your hands are tired, you're older. You have something that makes it difficult to hold on to things. So they're lighter. The words can be bigger. As I pointed out, I can no longer sit on um I can no longer read on the thing. So I will order real books from the library because the words are bigger than they are on my phone. And I need to get another device in order to get the library books, ebooks on
Mhm.
my phone, on a device. But yes, there's a lot of positives to reading. That being said, I just still have a lot of these around for various reasons because you can pick them up at sales and things like that. Brian, darling, um, we are Tamara agrees that libraries are better than Valentine's Day. So
Yep.
spend your love on the library. And thank you for joining us, Rose. Brian, we have
I just want to point out that with libraries, you can also recommend that the libraries buy books,
right.
so that if you want my books, anybody's books, especially mine though, um, go just tell your local library and see if they'll purchase it.
It was
Um,
interesting. One of the authors that I like, that's down in the States that I wouldn't think had just said, "Oh, I'm so excited that Penetanguishene Library had taken on some of their books." And that was not a combination I ever saw coming. But not that I keep track of those things, but I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool that it traveled that far.
yeah.
So it yeah, yes. We were going to talk about chapbooks. Brian, we have 3 minutes
Okay.
left.
Chapbooks are just little do-it-yourself books. You print them up like this, a few pages.
I have
You
one because
fold
I
them
got
up.
one for Halloween.
Yes, that's what this one is. Just a little bit bigger, and you print them up. I have a little blog post on my website on how to actually physically do it. But there are, but they're a lot of fun, um, and it can be just a few pages of some doggerel poetry
Well,
and some pictures, and you send them to friends, and people generally get a real kick out of it because you've done
okay, I
something
can
special.
I can attest to this because Brian is very generous, as I've pointed out, and he normally makes like handmade cards with um with public domain pictures on them that are very nostalgic, and I love them. But I love them. I love getting them. But I must say that when on the day I really needed a boost, and to get a whole book of Brian's poems was phenomenal. So I would like to say I love chapbooks. I am like a chapbook fan. I think if you're somebody who does calligraphy, it would be great to put your own poems in there if
Mhm.
like with the calligraphy, or copy out some public domain ones, but they're in your hands, so it makes sense. If you're an illustrator of any kind, an artist of any kind, uh do this, and we will have more on this before because they will fit in an envelope, so no extra postage, no more than a card, right, Brian? Because
Right.
he is frugal about postage. So we should
I'm
do
cheap.
more
Yep.
about this because I love them. I love the whole idea. I mean, there's so much in history about them, and I just think they're a nifty thing. Okay, so Robin says, before you go, thank you, Vicky and Brian. Love the show. Brian's is awesome. But I have to live with him, Robin.
Thank you,
Robin.
Robin.
Have a great day.
So there, Vicky.
And there, Vicky. And Brian is awesome. Thank you, Brian, for joining us today. And yeah, we need to do a hot chat book thing. So get ready for that. Okay. All right. Take care. You had a lot of
Thanks.
comments. So that I'm so
Yes.
happy because you make a lot of
Thank
comments.
you,
So
Tamara.
thanks everybody. I'm going to
Bye,
bye
Tamara.
Tamara. I'm going to turn off the comments now. Okay. Goodbye, Brian. And I'll talk to you in like 10 minutes at Writers Group.
Okay.
So, okay. Take
Bye,
care.
everyone. Thank you for watching.
You're not going, Brian. I'm removing you. There. Okay. That was a fun show. I'm not sure what we made got to any points, but it was fun. Thank you everybody for participating. And until we get the mug, and until I see you next week, may your coffee be hot and your story sweet. Thanks for listening, everyone. And we don't have our end music.